Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome. My name is Edwin Ragas. I'm the director at the NYU Wasserman Center for Career Development at the School of Professional Studies. I'm really excited to kick off today's Behind the Title session, which is a session that our team, which is a series rather, that our team here at the Wasserman Center has been hosting to connect you with industry professionals to give you a better sense of what exactly happens behind their titles. And today we've got Dan Bravato here to talk about his career in sports marketing consulting. And how this will work is we're going to hear from Dan for about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for Q&A with him at the end. But certainly if you have reactions or questions throughout the session, feel free to type those things into the chat box, and either myself or Leica on my team will jump in. And we also want you to be able to ask your questions. So don't be surprised or caught off guard if we turn it over to you. You should be able to unmute yourselves if you want to do that. And we also have a really simple session worksheet that you can use to take notes either during or after the session. And we're going to put that link in the chat box. And so what you can do is you can just make a copy of that worksheet. You can save it to your drive so that you can type in notes directly. And some best practices to keep in mind while we're in the space. If you could just keep your mics on mute while you're not speaking to drown out any background noise. Dan's here for questions, so definitely be engaged, ask questions. And what else do we have here? To also be respectful of the time. You're here, spend your hour with us, and we'd appreciate if you don't leave abruptly. And also don't be shy, it's just a conversation. So really take advantage of the opportunity. And if we run into any tech issues or hiccups, thank you in advance for being flexible and understanding. And so with that, I will turn it over to our speaker, Dan, who is going to talk about what goes on behind the title.
Awesome. Thanks, Edwin. Appreciate the intro here, and hello, everybody. Thanks for joining and taking the time to listen to me rant. I always appreciate when people do that. So I purposely did not prepare a deck or anything. I am a very kind of conversational person. So feel free at any point if you want to jump in chat and plug a question, or I think you can raise your hand. If you can raise your hand virtually, that's great too. And happy to kind of stop where I am and kind of give you a quick kind of conversation around what we're talking about. Really ask anything. I'm here to help you guys. I obviously graduated from the program in 2011, so very familiar with the situation that you guys are in currently. And, I think NYU does a great job in prepping folks for what is going on in the industry, but I also think that you learn the majority of what you're going to learn about the industry by working in it. And so, feel free to pepper me with questions, anything out there, and I'm happy to answer. So, to start quickly here, my title is sports marketing consultant. I'm the president of the 76 Capital Sports Advisory, which is a venture capital firm and a sports consultancy. And so what that means is on the venture capital side, we're investing in what we consider to be the future of sports. So right now we're investing heavily in esports and sports betting and technologies, camera technologies. We had a camera technology company that rolled out at the Super Bowl that's in the pylon cam, so you can see a wide angle lens. So we're investing in those areas, and then we're simultaneously consulting in those areas. So in the venture capital world, when we take on investment, we're typically saying no to about 99% of the deals that we see. And that leaves us with about 1% of the deals we see that we actually say yes to. And that's nothing against the founder, nothing against the idea. There's just very, very specific criteria in what we invest in. So as a byproduct of that, we're interacting with a lot of people in the industry, but only representing very few. And so out of that popped out what is now our 76 Capital Sports Advisory, which is our consulting group, which is the group that I run, and my major focus. And so what that means is rather than saying no to 99% of people, we could now theoretically help that other 99% as well as our 1% that we've invested in. And so what that means is really helping folks understand and navigate the sports industry. So we may have a technology, i.e. this camera technology that's really tremendous, and they do a lot of work with the government. But how do they get in front of the NFL? And that's something we can help them navigate and figure out their pitch, figure out who they need to speak to, how their technology actually integrates with a broadcast. We work with professional sports teams that are saying, okay, sports betting just went legal in my state. i.e. what happened in New York recently, for where most of you guys hopefully are. And the teams generally don't know much about this because PASPA, which was the federal law preventing sports betting, was repealed in 2018. And prior to that, most sports executives couldn't touch anything related to betting. So now all of a sudden I'm expected to negotiate a deal against MGM, DraftKings, FanDuel, et cetera, and navigate that space with not having any knowledge of it previously. And in fact, not even being allowed to have knowledge of it previously. And so that's where we come in. So we represent a number of professional sports teams on sports betting. We work with esports teams and leagues and organizations, whether it be an ownership group or directly working with the team. What should we be investing in? Should we invest in Call of Duty? Should we invest in Overwatch League? Should we invest in creator economy and bring in influencers? And so really our job is to help our clients strategize around some of these newer areas in sports and then pop out a solution and actually execute on that solution. So it's something we've been doing I started my company in 2018 and rolled it into 76. And so we've been at this about 4 or 5 years now, which is great. And so I'll go a little bit back, but I'll stop there. Does everyone fully understand kind of the concept of our business and what we do before I go back into my career, which is how we got here? Cool. All right, awesome. And so I started my career, I graduated from NYU in 2011 from the sports program. I started with an agency in New York called Van Wagner, which was doing sports marketing signage, basically. So if you watch an NBA game and there's that courtside rotational signage or now digital signage, that was our bread and butter. We were selling that. We did that in baseball, basketball, college, EPL soccer, et cetera, et cetera. And we also did consulting, activations, et cetera. And we were kind of a catch-all sports marketing agency. So worked for them for a number of years, had the opportunity to learn how to sell, how to work with brands, how to work with teams and leagues, and then got shipped out to our LA office and did the same thing out there. It was great, got to live in 2 really awesome places and see the sports industry from the agency perspective. From there, I ended up working in NASCAR, was not a NASCAR person growing up, didn't really know much about it, but we had done some work in NASCAR when I was with Van Wagner. So I had the opportunity to learn about that and said, this is a really interesting avenue. I want to do that. And so I moved to Michigan to work for what was then International Speedway Corp, which is the folks who own the tracks that NASCAR operates on, or at least half of them, and now they're rolled into NASCAR, so it's one entity. But at the time, I was selling basically race entitlements. So think, the Rocket Mortgage 400 or the Coke Zero 400, whatever. That was kind of my job. And my biggest client at the time was Rocket Mortgage, or Quicken Loans at the time, the biggest mortgage company here in the U.S. And was doing a lot of work with them. My job was to sell to them, to sell to other people and generate revenue for our company. And I built a strong relationship with the team over at Rocket and Quicken. And basically they were like, hey, do you want to come work for us? And from my perspective, I had done agency work. I worked at a property/team in NASCAR sense. And I had never worked on the brand side. So I said, this is a really cool opportunity for me to go work on the brand side and round out my experience of the industry. And so I said, all right, I'm going to go do this. I at no point did I really think I was a brand person. And I'll go into that shortly. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It just wasn't necessarily a fit for me. But I said, this is a great opportunity for me to learn and to work for a really great brand that's spending a ton of money in this space. So I'm going to go jump in and do that. And so I moved to Detroit and started working for Rocket. Really, really love the environment there. It's Dan Gilbert, the owner of the Cavs and StockX and Rocket Mortgage and so forth and so on. He has built, in my opinion, a really tremendous culture in Detroit, which I really appreciated. It had a ton of diversity, whether that be both culturally, but also like people with diverse backgrounds with different experiences, from engineers to construction workers to people like me to mortgage people. And so it was a really cool opportunity for me to learn and grow amongst people who come from different places so that I can learn different things. And so I worked on all of our sports marketing, Major League Baseball, NFL. The Cavs won a championship when I was there. Esports, golf, worked with Ricky Fowler and PGA Tour and all those events. And really kind of fundamentally learned how a brand thinks and why they do the things they do, right? Why did they use this logo on the outfield wall in Yankee Stadium? Why did they do the commercial this way with Ricky Fowler versus doing it this way? Why did we sponsor this? What does that even mean for us? And so it allowed me to understand that, but it also allowed me to understand how that world works internally. So when I got something, let's say we did a sponsorship with Major League Baseball, I had to work with our creative team. I had to work with our social team. I had to work with our display and digital advertising team. all to build a comprehensive package that would deliver the results that we were hoping for as part of this. And so really, really unbelievable experience for me. The thing I learned the most was that I didn't want to be on the brand side, which I kind of knew going in, but it was still good to go there. But learned so much, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity I've gone there. And so I got really close with some of the folks who worked on Dan Gilbert's internal team and got pulled in on a different bunch of projects. Esports was one of them. This is back in 2016, probably 2015. Not that esports hasn't been around prior to that, but this was kind of that crescendo moment when it was coming into the limelight, and had the opportunity to work on it a little bit ahead of that. And really enjoyed it, and worked on a whole bunch of different projects. Dan bid for an MLS team, the X Games bid for the city of Detroit, and really enjoyed working on all this stuff. And finally, Fathead, if you guys are familiar with them, they're life-size wall graphics of pro athletes. Dan owned that company. They were not doing great financially and had brought in someone from his team to work on it. That person brought me in to help. And so I went over and led biz dev for Fathead and helped, that grow that company. And at this point, I kind of had an opportunity to look at a company very differently, right? Because I had always been tasked with looking at top line revenue, which means how much money can you bring in? Is this sponsorship for the race entitlement $400,000? Can you go sell, 1,000 mortgages by sponsoring Major League Baseball? I had never really gotten into the nitty gritty of like, okay, if I sell this deal to a race entitlement, how much are we spending on signage? How much are we spending on tickets? How much are we spending on activating that partnership? So how much are we really making? And then that, kind of comes into a term called margin. And we were focusing on, at Fathead was our margin, because we could grow our revenue, but we couldn't grow our profit, essentially, the money we actually would make from it. And so this was new to me, right? Like, you guys are probably in a similar boat. Like, we were not, taught finance at a really high level. I mean, we took some basic accounting class and this and that, but this was a new area for me. And I said, okay, I love this. I want to keep doing this. So I started getting really, really deep in that space, and eventually became the right hand for the president of Fathead and worked with him on trying to sell the business. And again, this is just looking at the sports industry now, having done agency, brand, team, property, if you want to call NASCAR either one, brand, and now kind of looking at a business holistically. And I realized that my interest was really in the culmination of all of these things, not just focusing on one. And to be completely clear, there's nothing wrong with that, right? I had plenty of friends on the team side, brand side, agency side. They all love what they do, and more power to them. And I think that's great. But for me, it was kind of, how do I take a little bit of all of this and do what I love? So what I did was I tried to cherry pick the things that I really enjoyed from each vertical and tie that into one career. And that's easier said than done, right? This took me a lot of time, and I'm giving you the glory version that doesn't include me quitting a six-figure job, me moving back in with my parents, me starting a company and making a couple $1,000s the first couple months. Like, that's kind of the hard stuff. But for me, it was worth that risk to try to build something. So around 2017, 2018, I left Detroit and I went to go work for Manchester City of the EPL. And it was kind of a little bit of a weird move, because I kind of had just figured out what I wanted to do with my life, and then was kind of pivoting back to what I had done previously. And I'm a big soccer fan, and my dream was to work for a European club when I graduated. And so having that opportunity, I said, I got to go do this, because otherwise I'll kick myself later. So I moved back to New York. I was director of partnerships for North and South America. And I enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. But I'm really glad that I took the chance to do this, knowing that that was what I wanted to do. So now I spent about a year there and trying to figure out during that time, how do I accomplish that goal of taking the little things and building them back in? And so at that point, I launched what became our agency. I got really lucky. My first client was 100 Thieves, if you guys are familiar with them from the esports side. At the time, they were super small. Dan Gilbert was their first investor, which is how I ended up at the table. So forever grateful for that, to that organization, for helping me there. And I had a client, like I said, it wasn't, it's not all glory and rainbows and joy and all this, but I had a client, someone was paying me for my time. And I said, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to help businesses grow, and I want to be a consultant. And so from there, it got really lucky. 100 Thieves did really, really well. No thanks to me. I mean, the team there internally is tremendous. They have a great vision and they have a great product. And from there, Major League Soccer became my next client. And I got hired to work on EMLS, which is Major League Soccer's FIFA league. And I was doing event production for them, helping put on the actual live event experience. And something I had done loosely in my career, and but never had done it like as a job. There's experiential agencies and event roles that focus specifically on that, but I had never done that. But I said, you know what, I kind of know enough that I can figure this out. And MLS, again, grateful for them, gave me a shot for the first event in LA, and then worked really hard and did whatever they needed. And they ended up bringing me back. And actually, funny enough, I just got off a call with them. We're doing EMLS Cup at South by Southwest in March, which will be the culmination event of their EMLS season to crown the championship. So still working with them. And so continued to build that roster of clients. We ended up working with a couple brands, some charities, RCN Cable, American Association for Cancer Research, all around kind of esports and growing their brand in esports. And then the last project, we got hired by the Vikings ownership group to help them with their investment in esports. They bought a Call of Duty League franchise and truthfully just didn't know what to do with it at that point, and had a very young team. And their COO, Brett, has been tremendous and brought us on and gave us essentially employees 2 and 3, myself and my business partner, to help build a team with him. And they're now super successful. They're called Version 1 Esports. And they have Call of Duty, they have Rocket League, they have Valorant, they have content creators. And we kind of built that team with Brett and the rest of the group from the ground up. We didn't have a roster. We didn't have a brand. We were Minnesota Call of Duty, and like it had nothing. And really bringing that to life was super fun. And I did have to move to Minnesota, which was a little cold and a little tough, but not terribly different from Detroit, but a little bit colder. And so took on that project, did that for about a year and some change. And then 76 Capital, who had we gotten to know over the years, reached out and said, we want to launch a consulting firm. Do you guys want to be a part of it? And so now just pausing for a second, our business was pretty esports focused, right? So as you think about that, we were consulting mostly in esports, helping people, whether that be the Vikings ownership group or Major League Soccer build an EMLS franchise, or a brand figure out how they should activate in the space. And so what the vision for 76 was, why stop there, right? Let's build a holistic consultancy that focuses completely on the future of sports. So betting and media and streaming platforms and wearables and technologies and metaverse and Web3 and all these crazy buzzwords that everyone throws out. And we said, wait a minute, Chris and I, my business partner and I, we own our company wholly, right? We had 50-50 split of our company, but our pie is this big because esports is this big. Can we take betting and media and all this and make a gigantic pie? And maybe we would own a smaller percentage of it, which we do, but was it worth making that leap to get that bigger pie and get a smaller piece of bigger pie? And we said yes. And so we ended up rolling our company into 76 and working with them to really help bring that to life and build out this agency. And as I mentioned, they asked me to come on and run the group. So I became the president of the group. And, I am learning every day, which is one thing that I realize about me that I'm really, really into. And I like to work in different businesses. I like to learn. I like to be uncomfortable. And again, no shame if that's not you. There's nothing wrong with that. You can make a great living doing that. But for me, it was about kind of trying to challenge myself on a daily basis, whether it be working with a client in a new space, right? We just went live with Magic City Highlight, which is a casino in Miami that's building the biggest highlight league in the world. And we built that, helped them build that from the ground up. And that was something, I didn't know what highlight was, call it 8 months ago. And now here we are having the biggest highlight league in the world. And so challenging myself and my team on a daily basis is something I really enjoy. And so when it comes to, what goes into consulting is, you're not going to know everything, right? Your job is to know the people who know the stuff and to have a good grassroots understanding of how everything works. And then from there, you learn every day and you bring in different people who have expertise. And so for me, my days range from, like I said, I was on with Major League Soccer right before you guys. Earlier, I was on a call with a technology that sells to betting operators, and it's a way to manage their CRM systems. Before that, I was on a call with a pro sports team owner, his group that owns an esports team, and they need help kind of bringing it to life. And so that's what I love about what I do, is literally on an hour by hour basis, my day changes, and it makes my brain think in different ways and makes me meet new people in industries that I may not have met, like the betting industry or the media industry. And for me, that is just the greatest joy, is just to wake up every morning knowing you're going to learn something new. There's a lot of jobs out there in sports that afford you that opportunity. And I think that's really exciting. There are jobs where you're really great at selling tickets and you want to sell tickets and that's it. And that's totally okay too. There's no shame in that. If you're really good at something, go run with it. My problem is that I have severe ADD and I get bored really easily. So it's kind of like, okay, what's next? What's next? And so, yeah, and so at a super high level, that's kind of my background and what we do. But I'll stop there to see if anyone has any questions or if I can dig deeper into some of the stuff. And happy to share more specific case studies about some of our clients and what we do. But I'll pause there for a second because I need some water and I've been ranting for a while, which I'm known to do. You guys got to give me one question because I need at least 15 seconds of sipping water.
Feel free to unmute yourself. It's a small group, so we can make it conversational.
Yeah, I just had one question. I was kind of curious, right? Because areas that you really built up expertise in, such as gambling and esports, there was no historical strategies that that existed, because like these are fairly new industries. So I just want to know from your perspective how you kind of went about familiarizing yourself with the industries itself, and what your kind of approach was in a fairly new environment.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I do that every day, right? Like every day someone tells me about something. Hey, we're doing a deal with Roblox and we're going to put NASCAR in Roblox. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And so you got to figure out what this stuff means on a daily basis. And so it's about learning how you learn. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but if you let me explain it for a second. So I realized that I learned very well by having conversations. I can read a book, I can read email newsletters, I can do all of this. But for me, it's about like having a dialogue where I can ask you a question. I can say, okay, explain to me sports betting. Well, for sports betting, each betting operator, DraftKings, FanDuel, works on a state level with a state, whether it be a casino or whatever, to get a license. And then I'll start asking questions. Okay, well, what does a license look like? What does this look like? So for me to learn, I'm very hands-on. So what I did was I purposely reached out to people in the industry and I said, hey, and I come from more of an empathetic position of not, hey, I'm the president of this company, you should talk to me. It's more, hey, I'm really impressed with what you've done in your career and what you know. I'd love to grab 15 minutes on your calendar and just pick your brain on what you're doing in the gaming industry, because I think it's really cool. And so that's been my approach, is to really just surround myself and reach out to people who know it. And they don't need to be executive, they don't need to be CEOs, they can be coordinators and AEs and people, anyone in the space. The way that I look at it is, if you work in a specific space, you likely know more than I do. Whether that be someone who works the front desk at a hotel knows more about hospitality than I do. A cashier at a supermarket knows more about supermarkets than I do. And you can learn from anyone. It doesn't need to be the top person. It doesn't need to be, the expert in the world. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because you can spend time with people and just learn so much about their business. Like a truck driver can tell you so much about the trucking industry that you have no idea about because you're not in that industry. So for me, I take every conversation to me as valuable. I can learn something from anybody. So for me, it's about spending time with people simultaneously in anticipation of those conversations. I usually do some research. So looking at newsletters, there's Sports Business Journal, there's plenty of newsletters, and I can send afterwards some of the newsletters in the gaming industry that I read. And again, I read a headline of, New York sports betting goes live. And granted, I know what that means now, but you guys may be less familiar. What does that mean? But what you can do is you can read that article, and then you can reach out to someone who does, whether that be me or a million other people on LinkedIn, and say, hey, I was reading this really interesting article about New York sports betting going live. I saw they had the biggest month in history. I know that your company just went live in New York. Can you tell me a little bit about that process? And what I will do is I'll put myself in the shoes of the receiver of that message. And I get a ton of LinkedIn messages every day, and a lot of them are nonsense. It's like, hey, Dan, I'd like to add you on LinkedIn and talk. What does that mean? What do you want to talk to me about? Like, who are you? But if you're like, hey, Dan, I read this article about esports. I saw that your company does work in that space. I'm curious about it. Can you tell me a little about it? I'm 100% more likely to respond to that message than I am the other message. And in fact, I will respond to that message, every one of those messages that I get, because that shows me that you took the time to A, pick a topic that you're interested in, B, realize that I work in that space, and C, reach out to me in a professional manner. So I think that's a great way to do it, is read up on it and then find people who know the space and reach out to them, but also figure out what your best way of learning is, because you may be able to bury your nose in a book and learn way more than I can learn. I'm just not a great reader, and I'm not good at cognitively at reading and then translating. And so for me, it's about talking to people. So that was a really long answer to your question, but hopefully it answered it. Cool. Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, if I could just build on that question. So it feels like in these days, like it feels like things are changing so quickly, and like to get clients or customers, you have to have so many qualifications, like especially on LinkedIn, or like a certification saying you can do XYZ. So how do you get clients in such a fast changing industry, like when with like esports and stuff? How do you say like, oh, I know how to do XYZ when it's just become a thing?
Yeah, it's something, you know, a little imposter syndrome that I struggle with every day. For me, it's your name and your company is your brand, and specifically because I own a piece of our company, it is even more my brand, right? So I make sure that anything we do and I do is what I would want to represent myself. So I'm not going to take on a consulting project in concessionaire, you know, should we raise hot dog prices? I just don't know that world, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you I do. Could I probably go win a contract to go do that? Probably. Could I probably make $50,000? Probably. But then my name in that industry is, you know, Dan charges $50,000 and he really didn't know what he's talking about. And then even though I know what I'm talking about in esports and betting, this person might talk to that person and say, he doesn't really know what he's talking about. And that person says, okay, Dan's fake. And so for me, that is the biggest fear in the world, is that I lose my brand and lose my reputation in the industry, because that's how I get the majority of my business. And the way that I look at it is, we do really good work for all of our clients. And, you know, sometimes, and this occurred in the pandemic, is they're people too, right? So in the case of the pandemic, we had clients who I had contracts with for the rest of 2020. And, you know, I looked at them and I said, hey guys, like, I can't help you right now. The thing that I'm supposed to be doing is live esports events or finding sponsors or whatever it may be. Realistically, I can't do that in this environment because of everything that's going on. Let's just hit the pause button. And for me, that's taking money out of my pocket. That's really hard for me to do, but I know that I'm playing a long game, not a short game. So I'm going to probably lose out on $100,000 in 2020, but hopefully that builds my reputation and my brand so that in the next 25 years, that's going to be $10 million, right? And so for me, it's about my reputation, my firm's reputation, and making sure we're doing the right thing and we're not taking on projects we don't want. And then I always recommend that my potential clients speak to people that we have mutual connections with. Because more often than not, the reason we get business is because we get introduced by someone. Someone said, hey, you should talk to Dan and his group. They know that area. Or, hey, talk to Dan. He's got something really interesting for you. And the only reason that works is because I do good work. I have good relationships with my clients and I look out for people. And if I don't do that or I lose that, my whole house of cards, as I call it, will collapse. And I don't want that to happen.
I actually have a follow-up question to that. So you're in sports marketing consulting. Are you noticing things that your clients are more likely to go to a consulting firm for, right? Like, what are the top 2 or 3 business needs, reasons why someone would go to you or just a consulting firm, right? Or consulting agency? And in turn, is it almost better to be a generalist or a specialist? And what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's two good questions. So first, you know, where we specialize in more of these nascent areas in sports, you know, sports betting is our #1 vertical from a revenue standpoint. Esports is #2, and then media/new league building is #3. And I think that's a sign of the times, right? Sports betting is everything you're hearing about. You guys saw all the commercials in the Super Bowl. Like, that's an area where teams just don't know enough. And as I said previously, like back in 2018 when PASPA was repealed, and Canadians' version of PASPA, which is C218, was just repealed in 2021. So they're even further behind than we are, and we're working with a couple of Canadian professional teams on that right now. Is we provide something that they don't understand. But the way that we do it is we take an effort to learn their business. And so another example, we have a gaming share company that we work with. They make furniture. They manufacture furniture. They can get a chair built in China, put it on a boat, and get it shipped here and put it on a Walmart shelf 100 times better than I ever can. But what they can't do and what I can do is I can get them an understanding of the esports world is, okay, this chair, is this aimed at a younger generation that might play Roblox or Minecraft? Or is this a chair that's geared towards someone my age who might play Call of Duty or League of Legends or something like that? Because they know very well what they do. I know very well what I do. And if I can take the time to learn what they do, and they can take a little time to learn what I can do, we can build something really cohesive together. And so I think that's really important in where we position ourselves is what we know. And, being this kind of all ties into the question you asked about being a generalist versus specialist. That's a huge focus of mine. I read David Epstein's book. David Epstein's an author who wrote The Sports Gene, and he has a book called Range, which I highly recommend if you're interested in this topic. And it talks about how in 2021, 2022, this world is very much a specialist world, right? You have software engineers, you have people who buy and sell display advertising, you have people who work on planes, you have people who work on, whatever, car washes, whatever it may be. You have very few people who are generalists anymore because it doesn't benefit you, right? Like if I can design an app, I am way more valuable to Apple, to Google, to et cetera, getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars than to worry about the marketing of that app. You build that app, Tom will market it, Mary will build it. Boom, done, divide and conquer. But if you can be able to understand that, and I think this is really, really crucial for consulting, is I have to have an understanding of my client's business and my business. So I have to take that more generalist approach where I don't need to know the intricate laws of New York State with sports betting, right? I don't need to know exactly at what time you have to submit this paperwork, at what time you have to do this. I have people who do that, and those are my specialists. But I do have to know is how that market works at a high level. How many operators are allowed in that market? Who holds the ability to sell a skin or a market access point to a betting operator? Those are the things I need to know. And then simultaneously, I need to also be a generalist in their business. So in the sports business, why would MSG do a deal with BetMGM versus this company? What does the New York Knicks have to offer? Courtside signage, in-stadium activation, et cetera. And so in what I do, being a generalist is unbelievably important. And if that's a world you're interested in, I highly recommend that book. But yeah, I think I answered the question, but like kind of, understanding what our clients' needs are, where their business is right now applies to me somewhat being a generalist, and then where it can interact with what our world is. Also having a generalist knowledge of that, I think is where this all meshes really well. Cool. Any other questions? I've kind of run out of things to talk about, so questions will be helpful. All right, now I got to filibuster.
I'll jump in more. That's fine. Can you talk a little bit more about technical or hard skills that you feel people really need to be successful in this, as well as, let's call them soft skills that people need to be successful in this field?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that I will forever be grateful for about starting my own company and now building this company is you have to kind of learn everything, right? And that goes back to that generalist conversation we talked about. Like, I had to learn how to do our books. I had to learn how to do our taxes. I had to learn how to build decks. I had to learn how to build spreadsheets. And all of this stuff, like, it's not rocket science, right? You guys are all smart kids. You go to NYU, you understand it, but it takes the effort to do it, right? And I think that's something that's really important, is taking the effort to learn something is way different than just learning something. Anyone can learn something, right? All of you guys are smart people. You are capable of learning just about anything, but do you want to make the effort to do it? And I think that's something that I would really focus on is, and it's something I've also learned on the negative side is, my time, I know what I bill our clients for my time at. So in my head, my time is worth that much money. So let's say we need an app built and I'm big, I'm going to roll up my sleeves, I'm going to get my hands dirty. The time it's going to take me to learn how to build an app is so far out of scope from what I know and do. Is if I charge $500 an hour for my clients, is it worth me spending 1,000 hours on learning how to build an app? Probably not, because that money could be allocated to paying someone 1% of that and having them build the app. So there are times where you have to figure out where you're strongest and where you're weakest and where you can allocate that time to. So I think from the hard skill standpoint, I think being, again, it kind of goes to the general side, is having an introductory understanding of everything, I think, is really valuable, because it allows you to kind of understand how things work and what things are worth. Like, I can't do graphic design, right? I don't know how to use InDesign. I don't know how to use any of that. But I have an understanding of what it takes, and I have an understanding of how it works, so that when we hire someone to do it, I know that this is a 3-hour project for them. I know that this may take them 4 hours. I know that, hey, I need this by tomorrow. You're probably gonna have to stay up all night to do it. And I appreciate that you're doing that because I know how long it takes. It's not just like, hey, go do this in InDesign, it'll take you 5 minutes, because I know that it will take longer than that. So I think having hard skills are really important. Knowing where those are for you, whether that be building decks in PowerPoint, I think is a great skill. It's really important. Almost every business uses slides or decks or however you approach it. Spreadsheets are very valuable. Just having like a good understanding of formulas and all that, it can make your life significantly easier. Having graphic design skills, I think, is really valuable. Having social media skills is really valuable. I don't have any technical skills. I can't design an app. I can't design a website, UI, UX. I have none of that. But I know how to find people who do, and that's something that's really important. And I think as you kind of build a business and work with clients is know what you're good at, know what you're not, and surround yourself with people who are better than you at things you're not good at. So if I can't build an app, I need an app person. If I don't know the legal implications of a New York sports betting law, I need an attorney to help me do that. If I want to go into Web3 and metaverse, I need a game developer, right? And if you can figure out what you're good at and what you're not, it can allow you to surround yourself with a team that'll help. In terms of soft skills, I think people skills are really valuable in what we do. Consulting requires you to get very personal with your clients and understanding their business. You're going to spend a lot of time with them. I pride myself on being someone that's going to sound weird as I think about it in my head, but being someone that people want to spend time with, right? And I don't say that from an arrogant position. I just mean like I spend, Chris, one of my old business partner and our head of esports and sports, is sitting in one of our clients' offices all day today. Once a week, he sits in that client's offices. He gets paid for that. Client pays for that. Great. But that client wants him there, A, because he's a value add to them, but B, because they just genuinely like him. They enjoy having him around. They have fun together. They work on stuff. And I think that's something that's underrated in the consulting world is making sure your client likes you, because I think that's really valuable in them keeping you around, which in turn grows your business, whether you work for a company or you have your own business. So I think people skills are really valuable from the soft skill standpoint and being able to listen. Although I'm not listening much on this call, I pride myself on being a pretty good listener. And that's one way that I do a good job of learning my clients' businesses is by asking questions and kind of learning what they're, understanding how that works. Like I had a whole conversation last night with one of our clients around margin and retail versus direct to consumer. Again, you guys probably don't know much about that because we're sports management people. I knew nothing about that. Doesn't mean you can't learn it pretty easily by just listening to someone and taking some notes. And so I think that's a really important soft skill is to kind of be a listener and be able to comprehend the information that you're being delivered.
Okay, I had another question.
Go ahead.
So I just love to know what happens from like the consulting standpoint when you have like an esports client. Like what is your relationship with an esports client, and then what do they come to you for?
Yeah, it ranges tremendously. Like we've worked for esports organizations, right? Like 100 Thieves. And what we were doing for 100 Thieves is revenue generation. How do we get more sponsors? How do we get them to pay more money? How do we create assets? Something in esports that's pretty unique is in traditional sports, you have assets. You have TV visible signage. You have a concourse where you can have, hey, sign up for this, you get a free t-shirt. You have players, you have this, you have all these like concrete things you can deliver. In esports, you don't really have that, right? You don't necessarily have a home stadium. You don't necessarily have signage in game because it's virtual. It's a video game, which there are companies that do this, which I think is really cool. But you don't have necessarily that courtside signage that's at an NBA game in the back of a Call of Duty map. And so you have to get really creative when it comes to revenue generation of like these brands, and now I'm going to flip it, right? These brands are used to these assets. Okay, well, what is my 1080 by this sign? What is my this? Oh, well, that doesn't exist in esports. We're going to sell you content. We're going to sell you this. They're like, whoa, I don't understand how this works, right? And so one of the other things we do is we consult with brands that are trying to get in the space. Hey, we recognize that there's a really engaged young millennial demo in esports. How do we reach them? And what I joke about is that I had the hardest challenge in all of esports is I worked for a mortgage company. Who wants to talk about a mortgage when they're playing video games? Nobody. Nobody wants to talk about a mortgage. No one wants to talk about a mortgage ever. But that was my job, was how do I get mortgages tied into video games? And right, and we ended up doing a content house, and they lived in our house, and the house kind of told the story of mortgages and yada, yada, yada. Not the best connection, but close enough. So we work with a lot of brands figuring that out. So we work with teams on kind of figuring out their revenue generation strategy, strategy, we work with brands and kind of how do they integrate in the space. And the last piece that we do is we work with ownership groups. Team owners who are saying, hey, I own the Yankees, I own the Red Sox, I own this. I want to buy an esports franchise. And 9 times out of 10, these guys are old, rich people who do not understand anything about gaming or esports. They see, oh, my friend who also owns this team just bought a Call of Duty team. Should I buy a Call of Duty team? What's Call of Duty? And they have no idea, right? And so that's where we can really help them is develop a strategy of, okay, well, let's look at this. What does the P&L of the Call of Duty team look like? What's the total addressable market of Call of Duty fans versus Overwatch fans versus League of Legends versus Rocket League and all of these kind of things. So I would say those are the 3 major areas we focus on, is working directly with teams, working with brands, and then working with ownership groups. And then we sprinkle in some stuff here and there, like the stuff we're doing for Major League Soccer around EMLS. More we do that as kind of a legacy client because they were one of our first clients. Not really a space we play in a ton right now.
I have a question related to career trajectory. Mm-hmm. So I used to work in consulting and then joined this program because I want to get into the sports industry. And so now I'm kind of thinking, okay, I enjoy consulting. Do I try and go into like consulting in sports, or does it make more sense to actually go into more like, operations, sales, sponsorships, actually like build industry experience for like coming back to consulting? I just kind of want to get your thoughts on what you think about that dichotomy.
Yeah, it's an interesting predicament, and I've we actually had a young guy from the program, John Rose. I don't know if anyone knows John, but John went to Harvard, worked in finance, and did consulting. Really smart guy, and then he graduated, and he was like, I don't know what to do, right? Like I want to be in sports, but I have this consulting and finance background. And we ended up getting him hooked up. He interned for us during college, and then I introduced him to our clients at MLS, and now he works there. And I think one of the areas that a lot of folks with your background come from is either they think they don't have any value to the sports industry because, oh, I did consulting, like I worked for banks, I worked for CPG brands, I worked for whatever. But I firmly believe that the way that you are taught to think is what is so valuable, right? It's not necessarily whether you're counting chickens or counting eggs or counting widgets or cars. It really doesn't matter, right? You've been taught a way to think that the majority of people have not been taught. And I think that's where your value add is. And let's figure out how to leverage that, right? So whether that's working with a team and finding the right role within a team, like you could probably go sell tickets, you could probably sell sponsorship. But I think with a background in the consulting side, like depending on which segment of the consulting world you were, you might have a better job in operations. You might have a better job in quantitative analysis around TV visible signage or sponsorship spend or tickets or whatever. And so I would say you're in a little bit of a unique position with an established background is what is it that you want to do? Like, and what does that mean like holistically, right? And I ask people this all the time and it drives them nuts. Like, what do you want to do with your life? Like, I want to play video games. I want to play sports. I want to work out. Like that stuff is equally as important as like people can laugh at you and be like, well, that's not a job. But that's not necessarily true, right? Like I really like playing video games in my free time. And I also spend about half my day working with video game people. So I was able to check both of those boxes. So I think figuring out what you're passionate about, whether that's soccer or video games or tickets or whatever it is, and then reverse engineering what knowledge set and skill set do I have that's unique, and how do I integrate that into that industry, right? So I think that's, not exactly a direct answer to your question, but I think figuring out what you're interested in and how you can leverage your skill set, which I'm confident that you have a pretty strong skill set that most people in sports won't have, into this industry. Because I say this politely because I'm in this industry, we are not the smartest industry in the world. We're very much not. When you think about healthcare and you think about tech and you think about all this stuff, people running sports teams are not the smartest people in the world. And that's okay because it allows smart people like you guys to have a leg up, to say, how can we leverage this? How can we look at this differently? And I think your perspective and having that background is going to be really valuable for that.
Thanks, super helpful.
I got 12 minutes. That's at least 2 questions if I'm keeping up with my my average answer time here. You can ask me anything. Ask me, doesn't even have to be work related. What I like doing, what video games I like playing. Fire it out there.
I kind of have a question, but I'm trying to figure out how to word it. Because
Put it out there and we'll word it together.
Okay, well, because you said that because of consulting, you work with the teams, but then you also work with how to leverage them together. So I guess when you're trying to find solutions for your clients on both sides, is it more so of like the financial aspects of like how they build up their assets, or is it also something where it works well with like their brand image or their personal branding?
Yeah. So I think the question is like, how do you quantify ROI versus brand value? So let me give you an example. So when we worked at Rocket Mortgage, we had two ways to quantify. How many mortgages do we sell? And did brand affinity change? And what that means is, we send an email to all of MLB's database. How many mortgages did we sell from that email? We also had a metric that said, we did a survey of MLB fans. How many people knew that Rocket Mortgage sold mortgages? And did that number go up after the campaign? So we had two kind of ways that we looked at stuff. Is that kind of what you're asking? And the answer can be no.
Kind of, not really. I guess where it's like, well, sort of that way, but I guess you know how like they have like company core values that they resonate with, and they try to find similar clients to kind of extend that notion. Like, you know how like athletes partner with another brand that resonates with them and their values, that sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think so. So it's interesting. So what we would call that is like authentic partnerships, right? And we see this a lot in the gaming space, right? Where, you know, I'm a big bald meathead guy. Should I be out promoting the newest nail polish? Maybe, if I'm into that kind of thing, but probably not my world, right? But should I be promoting the new protein drink or the new, you know, Big Mac at McDonald's? Probably more in my wheelhouse. So when it comes to like how we think through our brand strategy is, let's make sure we have the audience that kind of correlates to who we are as a brand. Like our gaming chair company, we focus more on younger kids is really our demographic, and then the moms that buy their chairs. So am I going to go sign a Call of Duty streamer who may be super popular, have millions and millions of fans, but says the F word every 5 minutes? No, right? Because that doesn't align with my brand and my core customer. Will I go sign a female FIFA streamer who works with the Chicago Fire, who is awesome and very brand safe and plays in soccer, which is a non-violent game? She also loves our chair and she sits in our chair naturally. 100%. Does she have a smaller following than this Call of Duty streamer? Yes. But is it a better brand fit and allows us to probably get more engagement? Yes. Because you can tell, I mean, a great example of this is kind of, you take a you know, there's a female streamer named Valkyrie. Valkyrie's from 100 Thieves. And she created this blue light makeup that was because blue light impacts your skin and it makes your skin look worse, whatever. And basically she did this in partnership with a cosmetics company. And when she announced it, like the industry went bananas. They were like, this is BS, like this isn't real, like blue light doesn't affect your skin. You're just trying to sell something that's not true to you. And it caused like a really big issue. And they ended up shutting down the company within like weeks of the announcement. And it was kind of a testament to Valkyrie had built a really big endemic following. And they knew immediately that this was BS. And they were like, we don't like this. Like, this is not what we're here for. And the same thing can happen, right? Like it can happen to the brand, right? Like luckily that brand was a startup founded with her. But if we had built like a gaming chair brand to someone who like promotes a standing desk and doesn't use a chair, they'd be like, no way, this is BS, right? Like you're not real here. And I think that's really important, especially in 2022 in the influencer world where, you know, so many decisions are being made and pushed by people you follow. And whether you believe this or not, like my girlfriend is super into all these beauty and travel influencers and I make fun of her all the time. But here I am watching my gaming influencers and buying the controller that they use because I think I'm going to be better if I have that controller. So everyone's kind of guilty of it. It's just whether, you know, you align it properly because it's super important to do it endemically and naturally and authentically, or else, you know, the audience is going to sniff it out. So I think that was your question. How'd I do?
Pretty well. Thank you.
All right, cool. Anybody else? I'll check chat. I got a chat notification. No, take the survey. Not a question, more of a demand. But make sure you take the survey, guys. Cool. Well, if no one
Um,
has anything, I'm good to go.
Yeah, well, thanks, Dan, and thanks everyone for joining. Before we wrap up, we do have that link in the chat for you to give us some feedback. Dan, before we wrap, any last minute words of wisdom or things that you didn't cover?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell the same thing I say to you guys, to everybody, is this industry is all about who you know, completely about who you know. You could be very smart, you could not be very smart, and if you know the right people, you're getting that job, even if you're not the smart one. And I think I came into this industry, my parents didn't know anybody, I had no connections. Every connection I built was organic and from my hard work and from reaching out to people. So the moral of that story is like, that's what you guys should be doing, is getting to know people, like these events, like coming to this. I know it's annoying. I was in school too. Like I had to put on a suit and put on a tie on a Friday night and go to this dumb thing. But the people that you meet there are going to be the people that you need in your career. And so I think talking to everybody, being purposeful with your outreach, whether it be through LinkedIn or another channel, like build relationships with people, even if it's not necessarily like, hey, I met this person on LinkedIn. Like right now, if you guys are looking for jobs, like, and you reach out to me, I'm not hiring right now. And you may be like, all right, whatever, see you later, Dan. But like my network of people is hiring. Someone I know is hiring 100%, whether it's today, tomorrow, next week, 6 months. And the longer you build that relationship, the better chance I have of helping you, because I've now built a relationship with you and you're relevant to me. And so I would make sure that you reach out to anyone and everyone. And I always say, shoot or shoot, right? Like if you think someone is interesting, reach out to them. What do you have to lose? They ignore you, who cares? Like I would say, I spent my early stage just reaching out to everybody and anyone, and I probably got ignored like 80% of the time, but so what? That's life, right? Like, and so I think, I'll share this last tidbit, like at Under Armour. So Under Armour was I thought they were the coolest company in the world. And again, I'm showing my years here by telling you that Under Armour's cool, which is now the least coolest clothing brand. But when I was in college, Under Armour was super cool. And I applied for their internship program every year. I was at NYU every year, and I never even got an interview. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like I wrote the best cover letter and I this and that and this and that. And I never got the job. And I ended up meeting I think he's employee 4 at Under Armour through my current role. And I got to know him, and he said, oh, by the way, our internship, because I told him this story. He said, our internship program is all like, you got to know somebody. Like you applying, we probably didn't even read your resume. And I was like, but I had the best cover letter. And he's like, doesn't matter. We never read it. And I was just kind of like, you're right. I should have built a bridge with somebody there, because that's how I would have got in. If I've posted jobs for Man City, I posted jobs for Rocket Mortgage and NASCAR. You would be amazed at how many applications we get, thousands and thousands. And do I think that you guys with NYU degrees and your specialized study are probably the best candidates, or some of the best? 100%. But it's not as easy as like, okay, this person's a sports management student at NYU. I got to look at every single person's resume. 90% of them are nonsense, but I have to look at them in order to get that. And it would be way easier if my colleague was like, hey, you got to talk to Adam or Kate or whoever. I know them, they'd be a perfect fit for the job. You're all of a sudden, I may not even open that list of 1,000, because I'll interview you and I'll be like, oh, that person's great. So I would say, like, talk to anyone and everyone, spend time with people, reach out to people. Like, and again, if they're not responsive, who cares? Just on to the next one. You got to have that mentality. That will help you in your career too, because rejection is a huge part of what we do in the sports industry, whether it be sales, ticket sales, sponsorship, just marketing ideas. People are going to say no more often than they're going to say yes. And I think it's a good way to A, get you connected, but B, prepare you for hearing no a lot in your career.
So with that, can folks follow up with you, and how can they do
100%. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me an email. I'll put my email in here. I can be helpful, I assure you, and have helped a bunch of former, I always spell my email wrong, so it's probably wrong, but I think that's right. Former students. So, actions speak louder than words, right? Like I have people tell me every day, hey, I want to come work for you. I want to do this. I want to do that. And then I never hear from them. And that's great. Anyone can say anything. I'm going to lose 30 pounds. Am I really going to lose 30 pounds? Probably not, but I'll tell you about it. And you'll be like, oh, that's great. He's going to lose 30 pounds. I'm going to look like this the next time I talk to you, I promise. And so it's about actually taking the work and reaching out to me, reaching out to these other people. So yeah, feel free. You will not bother me. You will not offend me. But make sure send a note that has purpose. One last thing I'll say, because I don't stop talking, is, make sure I did a class at Penn State 2 weeks ago, and I got so many notes after because I went on this rant. I got so many notes after, and they were like, "Hey, thanks for coming. It was great." Cool. And I respond to everyone, "Thanks for having me." But the conversation ends there, right? Like, so how do you keep that conversation going? "Hey, Dan, do you have time next week? I'm in the midst of 2 internships and I don't know what to choose. Can we chat?" Or, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit? You mentioned sports betting. Do you have 15 minutes to talk to me about sports betting?" If you just send me a note that says it was great meeting you, it was great meeting you. And I'm glad I met you. But like, if there's no action item out of it, it's very easy for me, who's very busy, to just reply back and say, "Great, you too," and then never talk to you again. So try to give someone something to respond to, not just an outreach, and be purposeful, right? Like, I enjoyed when you talked about this. And I'm not saying this just to gloat, but like, people respond well to you responding to them. So, I really enjoyed the thing you told me about New York sports betting or whatever. Or I really enjoyed that you brought up this story or that book. I actually read the book, or I bought the book. And then I'm like, oh, these people are listening to me. That's really cool. And that applies to everybody, right? Not just me, but do that with everyone. Be purposeful, give a reason, give me something that you want back in exchange, and it will go a long way for you.
All right. Very
Cool.
insightful insight and advice, Dan. Thank you. It's really great to have especially alums come back to speak to the community. So again, thank you everyone for joining. Dan, thanks again. For the folks here, be sure to check out the other Behind the Title sessions that are coming up, and we'll see you all soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.